The sheriff is, by law, the chief law enforcement officer in the county. And his responsibility, we'll have to break it up in a couple of parts. First of all, we'll talk about the general law enforcement side of it, is to provide police services for, which includes patrol and investigative services and those types of things in all the areas of the incorporated, outside the incorporated city limits of the cities. So typically the sheriff doesn't operate, he has jurisdiction to do so, but doesn't operate within the cities because they have their own police department that answers the calls and those sorts of things. The other side of that is the jail. The sheriff is responsible for the jail, as Mr. Chody said earlier. The jail is a huge responsibility for the sheriff. And that's because this jail has a budget of over $24 million annually. They are short-staffed. They have a very good jail, and I think they're doing a pretty good job in running the jail. They do have morale issues there because of low pay and work environment and some other things I'll talk about a little bit later. But that's one of the key responsibilities for the sheriff, is to run the jail. So, you know, that basically is the responsibilities of the sheriff.
Thank you. Bill?
The responsibilities of the sheriff are even broader than that. It's important to understand that you're not electing me to be a street cop and make me WIRS. I've done many things like international hostage negotiations. I've been at the ground level. You don't need a peace officer license to arrest someone. You can still do a citizen's arrest, which I have done. Now, getting back to the responsibilities of the sheriff, what Mr. Elliston said is all true, but there's also additional areas. When you look at Article 8 of the Code of Criminal Procedure for Texas, I'm the only candidate that has real-life experience responding to that sort of situation. Neither one of these people have done that. So when you look at the responsibilities of the sheriff, it's the conservator of the peace, which is much broader, which also requires having an understanding of the community, the business world, the requirements and needs of our citizens. I'm the only one in this panel who has ever had business experience and been out into the community dealing with the day-to-day real-life problems that you all face in terms of managing people, sustaining businesses, profit and loss. My time on the ESD as a commissioner, we evaluated what the needs of our constituents were, how to deliver first responders in an affordable situation. We had to set tax rates. We had to be managers and good stewards of your money. So being a sheriff goes way beyond playing policeman.
Robert?
I would actually disagree, because being a sheriff, you are going to be put in positions to observe your deputies making decisions, taking life and liberty from personnel. And when you're making those decisions and you've never experienced what it's like to be on the road of a county road at 3 in the morning making arrests and have to use a use of force, and you don't know what it's like when the back of the hair on your neck stands up because that person makes a furtive movement that is potentially life-threatening, and then you're going to judge the actions of a young man or woman who's making a decision based on what they see and never experienced it, you can't make an informative decision that way. But when we talk about the role of the sheriff, and it was mentioned, the roles are the sheriff oversees the jail, and the sheriff oversees the patrol side for the unincorporated portions of the county. But they also they deal with the security for the courts. And so they do a vast array of things, and so those are the major roles of the sheriff's department.
Okay.
Rebut.
Yes, sir.
I find it fascinating that Chody finds no correlation between living in a hotel room with drug lords, the same hotel, and being in an extremely dangerous environment as having no relationship to law enforcement. Also commanding military personnel and having to send them into battle necessarily to take charge of the safety and security of civilians and potentially having to use deadly force. That those experiences and knowledge for 30 years say that I do not have the capability to judge the behavior of our outstanding deputies that are on the force. I find all of these activities directly correlating. You know, managing people and their performance is consistent across multiple disciplines.
Thank you, sir.
Reba?
Yes, sir.
I'm not attacking. I take this, I'm very passionate about what's going on. I want to make sure whoever's sheriff has that experience that's needed, and I'm pointing out some things that I think are important. This is not a personal attack. This is something that's important to me. I care about our law enforcement. Whether I'm sheriff or not, I care about who is leading that agency, because I will be driving down the same roads that you will be. My kids will be driving down the same roads you will be, and I am concerned about that. So yes, there's some experience up here that have those functions that I actually admire, but there are some things that I think are qualified to point out, and that's all that I'm trying to do.
Okay. To what do you attribute the current problems with morale in the sheriff's department, and what do you propose that you will do as sheriff to deal with these problems? Bill, is your question first.
Well, that's interesting. I've actually in the early forums a number of weeks ago with the Peace Officers Association, I took the initiative in pointing out these problems that we have in the Sheriff's Department. And we've actually had discussion and follow-on forums, and I think one of the things that's very interesting is the old concept that plagiarism is the greatest form of flattery, because many of the things I've said have been repeated by some of the other people that are running for this position. In terms of dealing with the motivation and management, etc., I've been quoted several times that morale is really just one of the many symptoms of a leadership issue. Leadership comes in, is multifaceted, has many things that need to be considered. But I've had many opportunities in the past to deal with this. When I was a worldwide training manager for Texas Instruments Computer Service, we had morale and also had interface issues with our customers. And I implemented a national program that rebuilt morale and also rebuilt respect on both sides of the equation, our customers and our engineers. And that's another pin I have on my lapel, was the implementation of that program. Every engineer was required to come up to that skill level.
Thanks, sir. Robert?
What's facing the Sheriff's Department right now, the biggest issue, are two main issues. Morale, just like you heard, as well as pay. And I believe it's in the order of morale and pay. And I know that because I have talked to the deputies firsthand. And in fact, you heard about the forms that we addressed. I was able to garner every endorsement from every law enforcement association in this county because of that, because they know I understand the problems that are affecting them. And when we talk about morale, me and Mr. Kelberlau have a disagreement on whether it's a symptom. I call it a result of lack of leadership. And the way you address it is simple. You address it by having a structured environment, in which I've done over there at the constable's office. And one way of doing that, because they are not a collective bargaining or civil service agency, is you establish their best practice policies and procedures. I've been recognized by the Texas Police Chief Association of Texas on implementing the best 166 practices in the state. In fact, we were only the second constable's office, one and two constable's office, out of 750 in the state to be recognized. We are one of 121 agencies in the state to be recognized. And that's what that does, is it sets up a structured environment of what the deputies and the employees expect of what they're supposed to be doing. And whether that's with promotions, whether it's with hiring, discipline, whatever it is, it's a firm, fair, consistent way to do things within the agency. And that's what they expect, that's what they want, that's what they deserve. And that's what I will be implementing at the Sheriff's Department. And I believe that will, one, raise the morale, and then we need to start addressing the pay issue. Because currently, the corrections officer is one of the lowest paid in this area. We're competing with entities such as Travis County. And when you're competing with that, and there's no career path for somebody because of unfair hiring practices, you have a 10-year officer who doesn't realize why they can't promote because it's not the good old boy system anymore. They get frustrated, and we lose that investment of that employee to take that experience somewhere else, which costs you, the taxpayer, because then we have to hire somebody else. And that revolving door continues. And when that continues, the pay becomes an issue for the taxpayer. So that is one of two of the things that I would immediately address when I get in.
Randy?
Well, morale is, can be a result of many things, poor morale, I should say. And, you know, it's very short-sighted if you try to tag on that it's just pay or it's just leadership or whatever. But the way I would address the morale issue, first of all, is, you know, you have to find out what the issues are. I believe the problem with the morale today at the sheriff's office is primarily due to leadership and pay. It's a result of having a poor work environment. And when I say poor work environment, I don't mean the air conditioner is not working well. I'm talking about they don't feel good when they go to work each day because they're not valued as an employee. They're not included in decisions that are made. There are promotions that occur or hirings that are occurring that are cutting off the career paths for the people who are there. The people who come in, they come in at the ground floor, just like I did at DPS. I started as a state trooper, and you heard what I said earlier. I went to sergeant, lieutenant, captain. I had a career path. Well, when a person comes in and they make the first step and they get ready for the next step, and all of a sudden somebody from the outside is just hired and put in above them, it cuts off their career path. Well, at that point, they're going to start looking for somewhere to go. So we need to correct those things. We need to, pay is an issue. We'll have to deal with the Commissioner's Court to try to get the pay up. I certainly have experience in doing that with the state legislature, and if I can do it with the House and Senate and Governor's office, I think I can certainly work with the Commissioner's Court to come up with a way of increasing their pay. When you talk about attrition and the employees that are leaving, attrition is a symptom typically of poor work environment and low pay. I have managed groups that had low pay, but because we had a good work environment, they were happy to come to work every day, and they would tolerate the low pay to some degree as long as they had a good work environment. I've had them leave my group and go to work for another state agency and then come back because they said, oh man, I was making more money, but I didn't like going to work every day. So you have to value your employees, you have to make them feel like they're part of the organization, and you have to provide a career path. And as the next sheriff, that's exactly what I would do. There would be no hiring at those levels to where it would cut off the career path for those people so that they would have a good work environment. And then obviously we'd have to work on the pay. And attrition costs you money. It is cheaper to pay people a little bit more than it is to hire them, have them go away, hire them, have them go away. That constant training, and you don't lose your worst employee, you lose your very best people, because those places like Travis County that are hiring them away, they're interviewing all of them. So they're cherry picking your very best people. So it's costing us money today. We need to correct that, and I would certainly be able to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Yes, sir.
To add on Randy's comment, exactly the things he described I've faced in the corporate world many times, and solving the pay problem is fairly easy when you lay out the issues and have a game plan. The best way to address not just morale issues, but your overall performance of your organization has been my philosophy for years, is that the people working for you are trained professionals, and you get 99% of your answers and your solutions from them. You get their good ideas, and your primary job as a leader is to facilitate the implementation of those solutions. So most of our solutions will be by bringing together both sides, the corrections and the law enforcement side of the Sheriff's Department, and identifying the best way to move forward for success, and providing all of those motivational reasons for not leaving, even though the pay may be equal or slightly less than other locations. So it's a people job.
Thank you, sir. Some sheriffs expand the role of the sheriff in various ways. What would you want to expand? How would you want to expand the sheriff's role? Would you want to expand the sheriff's role, and if so, how? Robert, your question first.
That's actually a good question. Yes, there are ways that I would want to expand locally, and one is one I mentioned already, the DWI enforcement program. Because when I received that grant at the constable's office to do DWI, they based it on the size of agency. And because it is a smaller agency, I wasn't able to provide more than 5 deputies during the peak times for DWIs. And because the sheriff's office refused to do that, if the sheriff would have accepted that grant, you would have had possibly more officers or deputies to patrol your area, your neighborhood. When we think of areas like Sun City, my DWI program wasn't addressing the Sun City area because we were in the Round Rock Cedar Park area, and because of staffing, we couldn't do anything. We couldn't be up as far up north, or north. So that's one area that I would like to. I would like a more proactive community outreach programs. One, just something as simple as social media, being transparent. When I was as the constable, when we would do programs such as the Click It or Ticket program, we would post that we're going to be in this location. That way citizens who were monitoring the Facebook could see that. I contacted the local radio station, said we were going to be in this location, so please buckle up. Then we actually we had a sign at the location where we were making the enforcement stops, telling people, I was holding the sign that says "Click It or Ticket being in process. I am a police officer, buckle up." And if they did all those things after all those conditions and didn't buckle up, then we would pull them over. And not everyone got a citation. It was the grant required that we issue at least one citation, so depending on where you were at the time. But I would also like the community to be involved in areas, and I think some people may disagree with this, at least on the panel, is a Sheriff's Police Academy. I want the community to come in and see what we are doing, why officers are making the decisions they are. Every agency around here has a Citizens Police Academy. And that's important, especially in today's police culture, because you have Ferguson and Baltimore, and people are, when you see an event on YouTube, it's very easy to say, well, he shouldn't have done this or she shouldn't have done that. And in fact, they may have been completely justified. Sometimes police work is just ugly work. But we certainly have a responsibility to the community to try to help them understand what we're doing. I would also like to get our young people involved in, when we talked about the DWI, show them educate them what the ramifications of drinking and driving are, getting with the judges in the community and saying, hey, is there a way, instead of punishing this 18 to 21-year-old for minor possession ticket, to maybe take them to a trip to the Travis County Morgue to show them what the result of DWI is? I mean, not necessarily a scare tactic, but an educational tactic to say, hey, this is what the result is when you decide to drive after 3 beers or 3 alcoholic beverages, something like that. But I want to be transparent, and I want to be proactive and have creative ideas from the community. You may have an idea that I haven't considered yet, and take those things and just be more proactive.
Randy?
Well, as far as expanding the sheriff's role, first of all, I think we need to make sure that we're doing the job that we're supposed to be doing to begin with. As I go around the county and talk to people, particularly out in the most rural areas, what I'm being told is they don't care about us. You don't care about us. You know, why should I vote? Well, you need to vote. If you're not being serviced by the sheriff's office, you need to vote that somebody else is your sheriff. And they say, well, if we call the sheriff, you know, it's an hour or longer for them to ever show up. Well, so first of all, instead of expanding the role, which is not a bad thing, we need to make sure we're doing what we need to begin with. You know, and there's many good programs. Mr. Chody's talked about some of those, but also utilizing, if we don't have enough deputies, which we don't, we could utilize a program of reserve deputies. Many sheriff's offices do this. It's something that you need to guard very closely. You can't just let anybody be one, but we have enough retired police officers with years and years of experience that live in Williamson County that would donate their time periodically to come in and work and to assist, not by themselves, but would assist other deputies so that we'd have better coverage and maybe get our calls, time of response for our calls down. You don't need a deputy an hour after something's happened. You need somebody that can get there a little quicker. Now, rural area is trickier. It's harder to do than in the cities because you've got those long distances to go. But there's no reason that we can't get those call rate, the time of response down so that we can service all the people in this county. So I think that's very important. Community outreach is tremendously important. You know, you'll hear me talk about having a service-minded department. We all need to understand who we work for. We work for you, the people of Williamson County. And everybody that works in that department, if I'm the sheriff, will understand that philosophy and know that their first responsibility is to take care of you, the citizen of this county, and do it in a respectful way and do it in a timely manner to the best of their ability. You know, as far as having programs of Click It and Ticket, those are wonderful. As a DPS guy, man, we promoted those things. DWIs are tremendous. But if you can't make your calls for service, you don't have time to do some of those other things. Now, grant programs are great because it's overtime. But when you're talking about doing it in conjunction with your daily activities, I don't want a deputy writing a Click It or Ticket ticket. That kind of rhymed, didn't it? Click It or Ticket ticket. When he's got a call for service somewhere out he needs to be making. So I think we first of all need to make sure that we're doing the job that we need to be doing before we expand it.
Thank you.
Rebuttal?
Yes, sir.
Just to kind of cover what he was saying with the reserve program, I was actually, as the constable, I had at one time the largest largest reserve program in the county. I created a reserve program, and he's right in the fact that reserves are a great resource to use. They are very difficult to keep because you're asking people to work for free in return of one of their specialties. And a lot of agencies will use a reserve and say, hey, we want you on patrol in a uniform to take calls. But what I like to do and what I've been doing is, hey, what is the specialty this particular person brings that can benefit our community in this agency? And that's what I've been doing, and that's what I've continued to do. And reserves is one of the things I've been discussing all over the county as well as part of my platform. So that is a good idea.
Bill?
Well, the things that Mr. Elston mentioned, I've experienced the same thing in the hundreds of people I've talked to around the county in the last number of months. I've gotten many of the similar inputs, and it's important to listen to those inputs because that's our customer base. You're the people that we serve. The role of the sheriff right now is huge. Expanding it would require having multiple sheriffs. If we can have a sheriff that would just accomplish all of the current responsibilities of the sheriff, we'd be in great shape. And when you see and read the details on my pushcard flyer, it continues a goal I had when I was on Emergency Services District, and that's emergency response, getting our first responders to the site of a need in much shorter time. Right now, we can have up to 3.5 minutes in just call processing time before the wheels ever roll. So getting our services out, especially to the rural areas, like Randy said, is critical. It's been one of my goals on the ESD. It continues into my goal on sheriff, is that's one of our first jobs, is to deliver the service in a timely manner, whether it be remote or close in. And that's going to require some planning, some creative thought, and some changes in protocols and processes that we need to go do. So you'll find that this has been a consistent theme for me, not just for running for the sheriff, but for multiple years, to get this improved significantly.